The arts industry, one of the biggest contributors to the UK economy, with over 270,000 people currently in full-time employment and many more in part-time and pay-as-you-go contracts, it's hard to understand why the arts industry has been severely underfunded for so long. A survey uncovered that 57% of tourists said that the arts industry was what encouraged them to travel to the UK. But in 2020, all that stopped. A crisis hit the industry and the world that left a long-lasting impact. Will the industry ever be the same again? And how have people overcome this massive challenge? On the 19th of March 2020, the UK entered its first national lockdown.
You must stay at home.
Each and every one of us is now obliged, I urge, to join together at this moment of national lockdown and to halt the spread of this, to stay at home, protect our NHS and save lives.
Venues were ordered to close, the curtains at theatres dropped for the inevitable future, and all gigs were cancelled. The industry saw a 44.5% drop in its monthly gross earnings in the months leading up to June. Even without a global pandemic, the industry has been neglected for quite a while now, with public investments in the arts falling by 35%. This has left the arts in a critical condition. A month before the lockdown began, I was following Leon C at his gig at the O2 Academy in Birmingham. This is one of his biggest gigs to date, and I was there to document it and film a short documentary. This was before COVID had even been declared a global pandemic, and we didn't know what was to come. We'd heard about it, but not much was known, and there was little talk about it. I caught up with Leon a few weeks back, just as the roadmap to getting out of lockdown 3 was being announced, to see how he's been dealing with all the problems that have come along with coronavirus.
After the O2 gig, the O2 gig was sick. It was like the best night of my life, probably. And we had an amazing time, and it was like the culmination of 4 years work. And it was so nice to have all my friends there and have friends from sick from travelled, and we were quite buzzing. And COVID was sort of lingering, but it hadn't quite hit us as the big kahuna yet. We were sort of worried a bit. We weren't panicking yet.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it, like, I know that in the scene of the documentary there's a bit where we're in your room, and I remember having a chat about it, saying like, I don't know what we even said, it was something like, oh, have you heard about this thing that's like kind of coming but not really here yet?
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, it probably won't come with anything. But it was just, we were so wrong.
We are. We were so wrong. Yeah, and that night was sick, and I remember also after like us going, oh, I mean, I'd quite like to do, well, you asked me in the interview like, oh, so what do you want to do in the future? Yeah, I think it's going to go, and I'm like, oh, I'd quite like to go and play some more gigs with the band and get out of it and maybe try a few other cities and see if we can click in there, and alas, nothing. And then when it sort of arrived, it just sort of wiped us out. I remember we had sort of 5 band gigs, which was the first time we'd had so many in April. All cancelled. Music had been the centre point to my life. For and now it was 4 years, totally ruined. And now it was totally ruined. I didn't have anything to see. Or to look forward to, and I remember that's at least how it felt. And I remember desperately overcompensating, luckily for me, and panicking about it. You know, luckily for me, it wasn't my income.
COVID's affected many areas of the arts industry, and I caught up with comedian Ruth, who's from Blackpool, just to see how things have been going for her. How did things change once the pandemic kind of came about, and was it like such a sudden change to try and adapt?
Oh, it was just, obviously naively, when it all sort of kicked off, we're going, just a few gigs, just got a few gigs cancelled, that's fine. And then thought, oh, maybe it'll last till June. My goodness, a few months. What? And then we went, all right, it's just a nice little rest, because like I'd had so much booked in. So I was going to be doing a Soho theatre show. I was going to be doing another tour of so I had like 3 things on the go, and another couple of commissions. Like, it was going to be the year that like launched everything. It felt like, oh, I've got so much going on, and then boom, it just stopped. And sat at home. Luckily, I'm in lockdown with my partner, and he's a comedian as well and a writer. So we started going, oh, well, let's just play around, do some different things. And that's been one of the positive things that's come out of the whole lockdown. It's given us a chance to play and create something different. So it's really allowed us to go in a different direction. But it was a big shock to the system. And having, like, for 15 years, I have been performing every week.
Yeah.
Like a couple of holidays throughout the year. I mean,
I also headed down to a studio in the south of the UK this week to catch up with one of the biggest up-and-coming pop-punk bands, Slackrr. I was talking to the lead singer, Scotty, about how the pandemic's been affecting them, and when lockdown was released, what happened?
Past year has been, horrendous basically for bands like us, who rely, the majority of what we do is touring. We spent the past 2 years before that doing over 270 shows, playing major festivals and headline stages at like the Isle of Wight Festival and things. And when the pandemic hit, I think we were in Liverpool on the 13th of March 2020, and we got news that the rest of the tour was going to be cancelled, everything was shutting down, our European dates were all put on hold until further notice, and then obviously got cancelled as things went on. So the impact that's had is, we had a tour, which was the majority of what we did, which was the majority of our merch sales, album sales, people turning up to shows. Had just a massive impact, just halted everything we were doing.
What's made the pandemic hard for a lot of people in the arts industry is that they are self-employed or working off pay-as-you-go schemes. This has meant they have fallen through the cracks and haven't been entitled to any of the government schemes and funding.
COVID has really affected the arts industry in general, but especially all the self-employed people. We're all out of work, we have nothing to do, and it's been very difficult. I know, especially me, I've had to take to social media. So for me to do a live now is a live stream, and I've kind of had to up my game with everything. But before, you would just turn up, plug your music in, sing, but it's so much more complicated than that, especially if you want a really good quality live.
Even if you did qualify for one of the government's niche schemes, you didn't get your full monthly earnings, which you're used to, which had a huge effect on many individuals as they weren't getting the money that they needed to survive. When the first lockdown was introduced, Rishi Sunak announced the furlough scheme. This excluded self-employed workers altogether. Many artists still find themselves unsupported and underfunded. A study conducted by the Oxford Economics in the July of 2020 predicted a 77 billion turnover loss for the creative industries in the UK, with employee numbers dropping by 122,000 alongside a further 287,000 self-employed workers.
Well, luckily, because we're self-employed, we've managed to get the self-employed grant, so we have been able to eat. And we know we are very, very fortunate to be in that situation. I can know a lot of my peers have had to try and get other jobs and do different things, but we've managed to stay afloat and off. But yeah, it is disheartening when you know that this country relies on culture. Like I'm from Blackpool. Like there is no other work. Like it's entertainment central. Like it's that's what it was built for. It was built for culture and entertainment, and then on the wider scale, like internationally, that's what we trade. And when it's not valued, you do go, oh come on. I know, because you do hear certain people go, well, you're just a comedian, or you're just this, but without watching comedy shows or without sitting and watching Netflix, or like you would have been bored for the whole of the the pandemic, so it is actually quite important.
I have not received a penny, so all the money that, I have because I had to claim universal credit, so I've been getting universal credit, but that has been about it, and that does not give me enough money to live on at all. So coming back to the people that follow me, it's been like, especially with my lives, it's been really helpful because I can go on and do a live and people can tip, so which is really cute when they do.
The arts industry has been hit massively by the pandemic, and in October 2020, something was done by the UK government that really rubbed salt in the wound to many in the arts industry. The UK government released a nationwide advertising campaign which pictured a young ballerina and had the writing, "Fatima's next job could be in cybersecurity, she just doesn't know it yet." This patronising advertising campaign was quickly dropped by the UK government after saying they were misquoted. For many, this really solidified that the UK government placed little respect on the industry as a whole and did not want to help support them at all through the pandemic. We reached out to the Department of Digital Media, Culture and Support, who created this advert and published it. This is what they had to say. With regards to your comments on the Fatima advertisement from last year, I should advise that this was part of a wider programme to encourage people from all walks of life to think about a career in the cyber industry. This was not designed to belittle careers in the performing arts sector, and the advert in the partner campaign has now been removed. Many people found this campaign shocking and really hurtful, and the government's response was not good enough. No apologies were officially made, and the campaign was merely just removed quietly. However, the problem is so much bigger than just artists. Venues have been ordered to close and haven't been open for nearly a year now. This is something that is too well known by Southampton venue, the Stage Door. I caught up with them earlier this month to see how things have been going.
My name is Julianne Watling-McCarthy and I'm the Artistic Director of the Stage Door performance venue in Southampton. So when lockdown was first introduced, obviously we had a very short amount of time to prepare for closing the venue. So everything that we had programmed in just stopped basically. So we just had our last event, I think towards the end of March, and then from then we just had to cancel everything for the foreseeable future. I think the public's attitude to entertainment and going out and enjoying culture and things like that has definitely changed in the last 12 months. I think people are more wary of going out now. We saw that even when we were able to open up for our pantomime, we saw a lot of cancellations, having to move people to different dates or rebook. The support that the government have given for venues like us and the industry in general, I mean that's two parts. For us as a venue, we have been lucky enough to secure the first round of Culture Recovery Fund from the Arts Council, which sustained us from October through to March this year. So we've been very fortunate in that. We're just waiting to hear whether we're successful with the second round, and if we're not, then we're going to have to sort of look and readdress about what we can and can't do going forwards. But I think for the industry in general, there's definitely been a lot of lacking of support. I think keeping theatres closed for as long as they did has had a big impact on venues and artists and freelancers. I think if you look at statistics, a lot of the hospitality venues and theatres and performance venues are actually one of the safest places to be. So I think the restrictions that were put on them were potentially too much and have, definitely had their impact. And I think for those performers, freelancers, sound technicians and the like that haven't had any support, you're now seeing people that are having to move out of the industry, and will they come back, and how much of an industry will there be to come back to is the question. Once restrictions are lifted, I think the arts industry will definitely have changed. There's obviously some positives that will have come out of it. People have found new ways to work, people have realised that they can deliver art into people's homes via online streaming and things like that. But I think fundamentally, enjoying live performance is about being there in person and experiencing that together. I hope that people, once the vaccine programme is rolled out and restrictions are lifted, I hope that people have the confidence to come back to venues and realise that, we do make this as safe as it can be, and that goes for, the majority of the venues across the country. So I would hope that people have got an appetite to come back to live performance, and I'm sure we'll get back to some form of normality eventually. It's just how long will that take and how many people will remain in the industry by then. So it's definitely a worrying time, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel.
To really save the arts industry, we must look beyond the big corporations. So much has changed in 2020, but what hasn't is the community spirit and backing behind the arts and culture sector. There is still a huge passion and community-led engagement for the creative connections that are in local communities, and the industry will bounce back. The arts is full of passionate individuals forever creating new content for people to enjoy, and it will take more than the government's underfunding to beat that. The arts industry has really been needed throughout this pandemic, with people relying on the likes of filmmakers, videographers, artists, singers to perform online for their entertainment while at home, as this has really helped people get through the lockdowns. The pandemic may be drawing to an end with the rollout of the vaccine. The end is not yet in sight for many individuals who are working within the arts industries, as this pandemic has left a long-lasting effect, with many going on to find new, more stable jobs. Please do support our arts industry. They do need your help, as they have been forgotten. Here at the Forgotten Arts Festival, we will bring together some of the best musicians, actors, comedians, bands, drag artists, photographers, DJs and more. Whoever you are and whatever your interest, we'll have something for you. We're working with the National Campaign for the Arts, who help support every sector of the arts industry. So please join us on the 30th of April 2021 for our live festival showcasing some of the UK's best talent. Be sure to save the date and save the arts. We promise it's a show you won't want to miss.